My cruel parents treated me like a stepdaughter. One day, I was baking a cake, and everything was in disorder. My mother stormed into the kitchen, shouting, "You idiot! Why did you destroy my kitchen?" She slapped me hard across the face, then took my finished cake and rubbed it into my face. My angry father also shouted, "You idiot! You are wasting your time." They kicked me out of the house. I decided on revenge, and the very next day, the police were at their doorstep. I was never the child my parents wanted. I could tell from the moment I was born that I wasn't the one they had hoped for. My father always wanted a son. He dreamed of a boy to teach his love for sports, to carry on his name. But when I was born, he hid his disappointment well, at least on the outside. It didn't take long, though, before I realized I wasn't the child they expected. I wasn't even their favorite. That title was reserved for Emily, my older sister. She was everything my parents wanted in a child: smart, successful, and with a promising future in finance. She excelled at everything. From a young age, Emily was the star of the family. Every time there was a family gathering or a visit to the neighbors, my parents couldn't stop talking about her latest achievement. "Did you hear? Emily got another A in her math test." Or, "Emily has just been selected for an internship at the bank. She'll be making more money than any of us." It was always about Emily. And me? Well, I was just there. I was Sophie, the one who could never quite measure up. It didn't help that Emily was 3 years older than me. She had a head start, and no matter how hard I tried, I could never quite get the attention my sister seemed to have no trouble earning. I started to feel like I was invisible. Even as a little girl, I noticed that when I did something, anything really, it never seemed to matter. I could bring home good grades, or even a trophy from a school competition, but no one noticed. But Emily? She didn't even have to try. She got praised for everything she did. As I grew older, I learned to fend for myself. I made my own lunches, did my own laundry, and figured out my homework without anyone's help. I think that's when I began to realize that no one was going to care if I succeeded or failed. If I wanted something, I had to go out and get it on my own. But it wasn't always so bad. There was one thing that kept me going through the years: baking. It all started when I was about 12. I was at Aunt Lily's house one afternoon when I noticed she was baking a cake. Aunt Lily was always so kind to me. She treated me like I mattered. I stood by the kitchen counter, watching her carefully measure the ingredients, and something clicked inside me. I wanted to try that. She let me help her, and she even taught me how to make my first cake. That moment, standing next to her in the kitchen, I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time: important. After that, I began baking in secret, trying new recipes in the kitchen when no one was home. I wasn't very good at first, but I didn't care. It was the one thing I could do where I felt proud of myself. I was able to make something that tasted good, something people liked, and for the first time, I felt like I was good at something. When I got to college, I decided to try baking a cake for my parents. I wanted them to see me, really see me, and I hoped that maybe, just maybe, they would notice the effort I had put into something that made me happy. I spent hours in the kitchen, carefully following the recipe Aunt Lily had shared with me. My hands trembled with excitement as I finished the cake and placed it on the dining table, hoping to get a reaction. But when my mom walked into the room, I didn't see what I had hoped for. She barely glanced at the cake, and instead, her eyes immediately darted to the messy kitchen. "What is all this?" she demanded. "Why is the kitchen such a disaster? Do you think you're in a restaurant, Sophie's?" My heart sank. I had worked so hard, and this was the response I got? But I kept quiet. Mom stormed over to the cake, her face red with anger. "You call this a cake?" she scoffed before lifting it off the table and, without warning, rubbing the frosting all over my face. "There's no place for this in our house. You need to focus on your studies. You're not a cook, Sophie. You'll never amount to anything in a kitchen." I was in shock. The sting from her slap still echoed on my cheek, and now my face was covered in frosting. My dad stood in the corner of the room, not saying a word. But I could see it in his eyes: disappointment. It was as if I had just ruined my one chance to earn their approval. And at that moment I realized that I would never get it. "Leave," my father said coldly. We don't need you here, making messes in our home. Get out, Sophie. You're not welcome. And just like that, I was thrown out of the house. My own parents had kicked me out for doing something I loved. I couldn't understand it. Was it really so wrong to have a passion for baking? Was I really so worthless in their eyes? I spent the night in my car, crying, trying to make sense of everything that had happened. I didn't know where to go, but then I thought of Aunt Lily. She was the one person in my life who had always made me feel like I mattered. I picked up my phone, dialed her number, and in a tearful voice, I told her everything. "Come stay with me," Aunt Lily said without hesitation. "You'll always have a place here. Don't worry about your parents. They don't know what they're missing." So I left my childhood home behind and moved in with Aunt Lily. She gave me a sense of peace, a sense of belonging that I had never known before. And in a way, her support gave me the strength to continue on my path. My parents had made their choice, and now I would make mine. I couldn't rely on them, so I would rely on myself. With Aunt Lily's encouragement, I finished my business degree, but deep down, I knew my heart wasn't in it. Baking was my passion. I had no desire to be a part of the corporate world. But I kept pushing forward because I didn't want to disappoint Aunt Lily. I knew that if she was proud of me, I would be able to stand tall. Little by little, I started baking more and more, and eventually I took a professional baking course, something I knew would help me build the life I dreamed of. My parents never called. They didn't care about my dreams. But Aunt Lily did. She helped me find the courage to be who I really was. And so, I took my first steps toward my future. I decided to follow my heart, no matter how much my parents hated it. But little did I know, the biggest challenge was still to come. After moving in with Aunt Lily, things slowly began to settle down. It wasn't easy, of course. I had so many emotions running through me. The pain of being rejected by my own parents, the anger, and the feeling of failure, it all weighed heavily on me. But Aunt Lily was always there for me. She never judged. She simply supported me and encouraged me to keep going. She didn't care about my parents' approval. She cared about me, and for the first time in my life, I truly felt seen. I continued with my business degree, though it was hard to focus on something that didn't ignite any passion in me. But I pushed through because Aunt Lily was so proud of me. And she was always telling me how proud she was of my baking. "Sophie," she'd say, "you have a gift. You can turn any basic ingredient into something extraordinary." It wasn't just empty praise. She meant it. And it made all the difference. One day, after I had finished my degree, I finally made the decision to pursue what truly made me happy. I enrolled in a professional baking course. It wasn't easy to tell Aunt Lily, but I knew it was the right thing to do. "I'm doing it," I said, my voice a mixture of excitement and fear. "I'm going to make baking my career." Aunt Lily smiled wide and hugged me. "I knew you would," she said. "I've always known." She believed in me, and that belief became the fuel I needed to get started. The course was intense, but I loved every minute of it. I spent countless hours learning everything I could about baking, everything from the simplest cakes to intricate pastries. Every day, I worked hard to perfect my skills. When I finished the course, I felt confident. I was ready to open my own bakery, to finally put my heart into something that made me happy. I saved up every penny I could, and with Aunt Lily's encouragement, I took the plunge. I rented a small space in the heart of Chicago and opened my cake shop. I called it Sophie's Sweet Creations. It was my own little corner of the world where I could do what I loved and hopefully be successful at it. At first, business was slow. I didn't mind, though. I expected it. Word of mouth is a powerful tool, and with every cake I baked, I knew I was getting better. I made sure each creation was beautiful and tasted even better. Slowly, more and more customers came, and soon enough, I had regulars. They returned, not just for the cakes, but for the personal touch I put into everything I made. My shop started getting attention in the local community, and that was enough to keep me going. Despite my growing success, I couldn't bring myself to tell my parents. I hadn't heard from them since I left, and part of me was terrified they would never approve. I didn't want their judgment, their rejection. I didn't want them to tell me that I was wasting my life and my time. But even though I feared their disapproval, I couldn't help but feel proud of what I was building. Meanwhile, Emily, my older sister, was living her life, and from what I could tell, everything was perfect. She had graduated from a prestigious finance school and secured a high-paying job at a bank. My parents constantly talked about her. Every time I saw them, it was always the same thing. Did you hear, Sophie? Emily got a promotion. She's going to be managing her own department soon. Or, Emily's already getting offers from other banks. They're all impressed with her skills. I could never escape it. My parents' praise for Emily echoed in my ears all the time, reminding me that no matter what I did, I was always going to be second place. But that wasn't going to stop me anymore. I had my bakery, my passion, and my aunt's belief in me. That was enough. I worked day and night, baking cakes for weddings, birthdays, and corporate events. Business picked up more quickly than I had expected. I even had a few local magazines write about my shop, which helped bring in more customers. The media attention felt surreal. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was doing something important. People were taking notice, and I was finally getting the recognition I deserved, not from my parents, but from the people who appreciated what I was doing. And then, one day, as I was wrapping up a cake order, I overheard something that made my stomach drop. I was watching the news when the story flashed across the screen. It was about Emily. My sister had been arrested for involvement in a massive fraud scheme at the bank where she worked. I froze. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Emily? The perfect one? The one my parents always praised? I thought it had to be a mistake. But as the details unfolded, the truth hit me hard. Emily had been part of a team involved in embezzling millions of dollars. The arrest was just the beginning of her downfall. I didn't know what to feel. Shock, confusion, maybe even a bit of anger, but mostly I felt nothing. It was hard to explain. I had always looked up to Emily, and yet here she was, involved in a scandal that was going to ruin everything she had worked for. But I still couldn't bring myself to contact my parents. I hadn't spoken to them in so long, and honestly, part of me was relieved that they would finally see the truth. Emily wasn't perfect. She wasn't the golden child they always made her out to be. But the story wasn't over. The worst was yet to come. The news of Emily's arrest didn't just shake me. It rattled the very foundation of everything I had believed about my family. For years, I had been living under the weight of their expectations, feeling like I could never live up to the standards set by Emily. But now, seeing her downfall, it felt like some kind of cruel cosmic justice. She had always been the golden child, the one my parents showered with love and praise. And yet, here she was, embroiled in a criminal scandal. I didn't know whether I should feel sorry for her, or just relieved. In some twisted way, I felt like I had been right all along. She wasn't the perfect daughter my parents had made her out to be. Still, I wasn't sure if I was ready to reach out to my parents. I had spent years convincing myself I didn't need their approval, but the thought of them now, in a crisis, seeking me out, it was hard to ignore. The days passed, and I kept working, burying myself in my bakery. I had built something from the ground up, and now it was thriving. My cakes were more popular than ever, and I was starting to see the fruits of all my hard work. I was proud of what I had created, proud of who I had become. But even in my success, the silence from my parents lingered. Then, one day, as I was closing the shop after a long day, I saw a familiar number on my phone screen. It was my mom's number. I hesitated for a moment before picking up. "Sophie, it's Mom," she said, her voice shaky. "We need to talk. It's about Emily." I wanted to hang up. I didn't want to listen to their pleas. I had spent my entire life being overlooked, and now they were asking for help after everything they had done to me? But a small part of me was curious. So I stayed on the line. "She's been arrested, Sophie. She's facing years in prison for what she's done," my mother continued. "We don't know what to do. We've lost everything. Your father, he's so upset and we're struggling. We need you." I felt a cold sense of anger rise in me. My parents, who had never once supported my dreams, were now calling me for help. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my emotions in check. Part of me wanted to just hang up and forget them. But another part of me, the part that had been desperate for their approval for so long, wanted to reach out, to offer some kind of comfort. I took a deep breath, trying to steady myself.
No, Mom.
I'm not helping you. You made your choice when you kicked me out of the house. You disowned me for pursuing my passion. Now you want my help?
No.
I'm done with you. There was silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her muffled sobs, but I didn't feel any sympathy. For so long, I had tried to please them, to gain their love and approval. But they had pushed me away, humiliated me, and shown me time and time again that I didn't matter. This was my moment of revenge. I wasn't going to let them walk all over me anymore. I've built something real, Mom.
I have my own life now.
You and Dad made your choices, and I'm making mine, I said, my voice steady and firm. Goodbye. And just like that, I ended the call. I felt a strange sense of relief wash over me. It wasn't the closure I had imagined, but it was what I needed. I had taken control of my life, and I wasn't going to let them drag me back into their mess. The next few days were quiet. My business continued to thrive, and I grew more confident in my decisions. But as time went on, I found myself reflecting on what had happened. My parents had rejected me, disowned me, and dismissed my dreams. But in doing so, they had shown me the truth. I didn't need their approval to be successful. I had built this life on my own, and it was mine to live. I wasn't sure if Emily would ever reach out to me, but a part of me hoped that, just like me, she would find her way, follow her heart, and build her own life, not the life our parents had forced upon her. Life has a funny way of working itself out. After everything that had happened, I never imagined I'd find peace. For so long, I thought I would always carry the weight of my parents' rejection, their harsh words, and the feeling of being unwanted. But with time, something shifted within me. I built something real, something I could be proud of. Slowly, the anger and hurt began to fade. My bakery had grown beyond anything I could have hoped for. I opened 2 more locations, and my cakes gained recognition all over the city. Local food critics started writing about my shop, and I even appeared on a popular TV show. I was living the life I had always dreamed of, doing what I loved and succeeding on my own terms. I had never been this happy. Then one day, something unexpected happened. It was just another afternoon, and I was icing a wedding cake when my phone rang. The number on the screen was unfamiliar, but I answered it anyway. "Sophie, it's Emily," came the voice on the other end. My heart skipped a beat. Emily? After everything that had happened, I never thought I'd hear from her again. "Emily?" I said, unsure of how to react. How are you?" She sighed deeply. "I know this is out of nowhere, but I need to apologize.
For everything.
For the way Mom and Dad treated you, and for the things I did." Her voice trembled. I spent so long trying to meet their expectations. But it was never what I wanted.
I've finally realized that.
And seeing you follow your dreams gave me the courage to change. I was silent for a moment, trying to process what she was saying. Years of silence and distance, and now she was apologizing for things I never thought I would hear. "I enrolled in interior design courses, Sophie," she continued, voice full of emotion. "I realized I was chasing a life that wasn't mine. Now I'm following my passion, just like you." A lump formed in my throat. Emily, the one who had always been perfect in our parents' eyes, was now living her truth. I never expected this. But here she was, telling me she was pursuing her own dreams. "I'm proud of you, Emily," I said softly. "I really am." We talked for hours that day, sharing our struggles, fears, and hopes. It felt like we were finally understanding each other in a way we never had before. I realized that, despite everything, I had missed her. The sister I once looked up to was now finding her own way, just like I had. It felt good to talk openly. In the following weeks, Emily and I rebuilt our relationship. We met for coffee, visited each other's homes, and shared experiences. I was genuinely happy for her. She had found a new path, and so had I. Our parents, however, stayed silent. It was clear they had chosen their path without us. But in a strange way, that didn't matter anymore. I had found my happiness and success. I didn't need their approval. I had built my life with Aunt Lily's support, and now, with Emily's understanding, I felt complete. Then one day, my parents reached out. After years of silence, they called to meet. I hesitated, but knew I had to. We met at a cafe. They looked older, tired. My father spoke first. Sophie, we were wrong. We pushed you away when we should have supported you. We're sorry. I could feel the anger rising, but I had changed. I forgive you, I said. But it's too late. You made your choices. I made mine. And with that, I walked away, feeling closure I never expected. Their apology didn't change anything. I had already found my family in those who truly cared for me, Aunt Lily, Daniel, and now Emily. I had learned that the people who reject you don't define you. Only you can write your own story. And for the first time, I was truly free.
This story is titled, My Wife Cheated and Stole for Her Affair Partner, then tried to come back after he scammed her. My revenge was perfect. Hey everyone! The channel's been slowing down a bit, and I spent so much time finding these stories for you. If you enjoy the content, please hit that subscribe button. It means the world and helps keep this journey going strong. Let's grow together. Now let's start the video. OP starts by saying, So, I 35 male, a dad to 2 great kids, Emma, 10 female, and Liam, 7 male. Life seemed good. Better than good, actually. I ran my own construction business, which I built from the ground up, and I thought my wife, Amber, and I had a strong marriage after over a decade together. Looking back, I should have seen the cracks forming. It started with little things, stuff you'd brush off if you weren't paying attention. Amber would zone out more often, glued to her phone. Then one morning, she looked at me over her coffee and said, You're looking kind of pale. Are you feeling okay? I shrugged it off. Just overworked, I said, pouring myself another coffee like that was going to fix everything. Running a business, being a dad, trying to juggle everything, it wears you down, you know? But deep down, I felt off. No matter how much sleep I got or how healthy I tried to eat, I felt drained all the time. Amber mentioned it again a week later. You sure you're not coming down with something? She asked, half worried, half distracted as she scrolled through her phone. That's when I finally caved and went to the doctor, figuring I'd get some vitamins or maybe a lecture about stress management. The last thing I expected was to be sitting in that sterile little office, staring at my doctor as she told me I had tested positive for chlamydia. At first, I just sat there like an idiot, trying to process what she'd said. That's not possible. I managed to get out. I've been married for over a decade. These infections can go unnoticed for a long time, she explained. You'll need to discuss this with your partner. I left that office feeling like someone had pulled the ground out from under me. Married for 11 years. 11! I'd never so much as looked at another woman in that way. So how the hell could this have happened? When I got home, Amber was sitting at the kitchen counter, sipping one of her fancy iced coffees and scrolling through her phone. She looked up and smiled at me, all casual, like nothing had changed. For a split second, I wondered if this was all some huge mistake, some weird mix-up at the clinic. But that feeling didn't last long. Hey, she said, how was your appointment? Fine, I lied, forcing myself to sound normal. I wasn't ready to talk, not yet. If something was going on, I needed to know the truth before I opened that can of worms. By morning, I had a plan. If there was one thing I'd learned from running a business, it was not to make decisions without facts. So I reached out to Rick, a private investigator I'd hired once for a messy contract dispute at work. I need you to look into something personal, I told him. It's about my wife. I don't want to jump to conclusions, but something's not adding up. Rick didn't ask a lot of questions. Send me everything you've got, he said. Give me a week. For the next few days, I acted like nothing was wrong. I went to work, helped the kids with their homework, and even laughed at Amber's stories about her day. But inside, I was a mess. Every time she smiled at me, I felt this knot in my stomach, like I was living with a stranger. When Rick called me a week later, I wasn't ready for what he had to say. But at the same time, I was. You were right to be suspicious, he told me. Your wife's been meeting up with someone, a guy named Derek. Hearing the name felt like a punch to the gut. Derek. Some guy I didn't even know was suddenly the center of my world. Rick didn't stop there. They've been seeing each other for a few months now. It started at the gym, but it's escalated. Hotels, dinners, even trips to your family cabin. The cabin. That was supposed to be our family's getaway, a place where we made memories with the kids. Knowing she'd taken him there felt like the ultimate betrayal. I thanked Rick and hung up. my hands shaking. I didn't confront Amber that night or the next. Instead, I focused on getting my head straight. If this guy thought he could waltz into my life and wreck it, he had another thing coming. And Amber? She had no idea who she was messing with. Rick gave me the details. Times, dates, even some pictures. Amber wasn't just meeting Derek for coffee or friendly chats. They were going full-on secret romance mode. But instead of confronting Amber, I kept my cool. I knew better than to blow up without a plan. I needed more proof, not just for my own sanity, but for what might come next. Rick didn't just stop with the basics. He dug into Derek's background, and let me tell you, this guy was a real piece of work. He wasn't just some gym trainer who'd caught Amber's eye. No, he had a history, a long one. Turns out Derek was a professional scam artist. His MO was finding women who were married, well off or both, charming them, and bleeding them dry. He'd already conned 2 women out of their savings and skipped town when things got messy. It made my stomach turn. Amber wasn't just cheating, she was getting played. And if she thought Derek cared about her beyond the money, she was dead wrong. Rick's investigation also turned up something even worse. Amber had started funneling money out of our joint accounts. Little amounts at first, ones I wouldn't notice right away. 100 here, a couple hundred there. But then the withdrawals got bigger, like she was getting desperate. She'd already drained nearly $50,000. And as if that wasn't bad enough, she'd forged my signature to start the process of selling the cabin. That was the last straw for me. I knew I needed to act. This wasn't just about catching her in the act or exposing her lies. I had to protect my kids, my business, and my future. But I couldn't go into this half-cocked. Derek was dangerous, and Amber clearly wasn't thinking straight. I called Rick again and told him to dig deeper. I want everything, I said. Every bank transaction, every meeting, every text message if you can get it. Rick didn't hesitate. Give me a couple of days, he said. While I waited, I played my part. I acted like everything was fine. I went to work, helped the kids with their school projects, and even smiled when Amber gave me her excuses about why she was coming home late or spending weekends catching up with friends. It was infuriating, but I knew I had to stay calm. If I tipped her off, she'd go into damage control mode, and I'd lose my chance to get the upper hand. When Rick called me back, he had everything I needed. Amber wasn't just in over her head with Derek. She was panicking. Derek had started pressuring her for more money, threatening to expose their affair if she didn't deliver. He had incriminating photos, texts, enough to blow up her life if he wanted to. She was scrambling to keep him happy, even at the cost of everything we'd built together. I sat down with Rick and laid out my plan. We're not just catching them, I said. We're ending this. For good. Rick nodded. You're doing the right thing, he said. But you need to be prepared. This is going to get messy. Messy didn't even begin to cover it. But I was ready. Amber and Derek had made their choices, and now it was time for me to make mine. The first thing I did was lock everything down. Joint bank accounts? Frozen. The cabin's paperwork. Pulled it from escrow and flagged the sale. My business? Changed every single password and secured all financials. Amber had no idea any of this was happening. She was too busy sneaking around and trying to keep Derek happy to notice the walls closing in. I kept playing dumb. I acted distracted, like work was overwhelming me, and I made a point of staying up late pretending to catch up on paperwork. You okay? Amber asked one night, leaning in the doorway. You've been so stressed lately. I smiled and shrugged, just trying to stay ahead of things. She nodded, looking almost sympathetic, which made me want to laugh. Here she was, playing house like nothing was wrong, while I was quietly dismantling her entire game. But I kept my cool. I knew better than to tip my hand too early. Rick kept feeding me updates. Derek, true to form, was starting to lose patience. He wanted more money, and Amber was running out of options. She'd already drained what she could from our accounts, and now she was looking into personal loans. She was in way over her head, and Derek knew it. He's getting sloppy, Rick told me during one of our late-night calls. He's pushing her harder, but he's also making mistakes. We've got enough to take him down whenever you're ready. One night, Amber told me she was meeting up with friends for dinner. I knew exactly where she was going and who she'd be with, thanks to Rick's tracking. Have fun, I said, kissing her on the cheek like nothing was wrong. Don't stay out too late. As soon as she left, I grabbed my keys and headed out. I parked a few blocks away from Derek's apartment and waited. Sure enough, Amber's car pulled up, and she went inside. I texted Rick to let him know. They're together, I wrote. Time to make the call. Rick had already tipped off the police about Derek's blackmail operation. He had enough evidence to connect Derek to multiple scams, not just the one involving Amber. Within an hour, the cops showed up. I watched from my car as they raided the apartment, dragging Derek out in cuffs. Amber came out right behind him, screaming and trying to explain herself, but the cops weren't having it. She saw me standing on the sidewalk as they loaded her into the back of a squad car. "Noah!" she yelled, her voice cracking. "What are you doing here? Help me!" I crossed my arms and shook my head. "You did this to yourself," I said. "You made your choices." The look on her face was a mix of shock and panic. She tried to keep shouting, but the cops slammed the door, cutting her off. I stood there for a moment, watching as the squad cars drove away. It was a strange feeling, part relief, part sadness. I wasn't celebrating. This wasn't a victory, but it was justice. The fallout came fast. Amber's arrest made the local news, especially once Derek's history came to light. People love a juicy scandal, and this was about as messy as it gets. I filed for divorce the next morning, armed with all the evidence Rick had gathered. The court didn't even hesitate. They gave me full custody of Emma and Liam, granted me control of all our shared assets, and ordered Amber to pay back every cent she'd taken. Derek? He was looking at serious jail time for fraud, blackmail, and identity theft. Seeing his mugshot plastered everywhere felt like closure. He wasn't going to ruin anyone else's life anytime soon. That night, I sat down with Emma and Liam and told them the truth. Well, the kid-friendly version of it. I didn't want them to hate their mom, but I also wasn't going to lie. Things are going to be different now, I told them. But we're going to be okay. I promise. They both nodded, and Liam crawled into my lap, his little arms wrapping around me. "We're a team," he said, his voice muffled against my shirt. The days after Amber's arrest were chaotic, to say the least. Between the divorce filing, police interviews, and trying to keep my kids' lives as normal as possible, I barely had time to catch my breath. But honestly, it was a relief to finally have control over the situation. The lies were out in the open, and Amber and Derek's schemes were unraveling. I wish I could say Amber took it gracefully, but that's not how it went down. She started calling me nonstop from jail, begging for forgiveness, insisting it was all a misunderstanding. "Derek manipulated me," she'd cry. "I didn't know what I was doing. Please, Noah, think of the kids." While the kids adjusted, Amber's legal troubles kept piling up. Thanks to Rick's thorough investigation, the police had plenty of evidence against Derek and Amber, including bank records, hotel receipts, and even some not-so-flattering text exchanges. Derek's blackmail attempts sealed the deal. He was hit with multiple charges, including fraud and extortion, and was looking at years behind bars. Amber's situation wasn't much better. While she didn't face the same level of criminal charges as Derek, her involvement in the scheme, particularly the forgery and financial theft, didn't look good in court. My divorce filing didn't help her case either. With Rick's evidence, the judge ruled entirely in my favor. Full custody of the kids, control over all marital assets, and a hefty repayment order for the money she'd taken. The day the divorce was finalized, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Relief mostly, but also a lingering sadness for what could have been. Amber and I had built a life together, or at least I thought we had. Letting go of that dream was harder than I expected, even after everything she'd done. Amber didn't take the court's decision well. A week after the ruling, she showed up at the house unannounced, looking like a shell of her former self. Her hair was messy, her eyes puffy from crying, and she was clutching a folder of papers like it was her lifeline. "Noah, please," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I was stupid and selfish, and I don't know how to fix it, but I want to try. Please let me come home." I stared at her, trying to feel something. Anger, pity, anything. But all I felt was exhaustion. "Amber, it's too late," I said quietly. "You didn't just hurt me. You hurt Emma and Liam. You put them at risk for some guy who didn't even care about you. There's no coming back from that." Her lip trembled, and for a second I thought she might argue. Instead, she just nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I'll pay you back," she whispered. "Every penny. I promise. That's between you and the court now," I said, stepping back inside. "Goodbye, Amber." As I closed the door, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. For the first time in months, I didn't feel like I was drowning. The chaos was finally over, and I could focus on what really mattered, my kids and our future. Once the dust settled, life found a rhythm, but it wasn't the life I had envisioned. Amber's choices had shattered the illusion of stability I once clung to, and I was left picking up the pieces for Emma, Liam, and myself. The kids and I were healing, slowly but surely, but Amber wasn't done trying to claw her way back into our lives. Her calls started again, escalating from tearful voicemails to full-on threats. "If you think you can keep the kids away from me, you're wrong," she yelled in one particularly nasty message. They're my children too, Noah. That might have been true biologically, but Amber had abandoned any claim to being a real parent the moment she chose Derek over her family. The court had already ruled against her for good reason. Her neglect, financial deceit, and utter lack of accountability made her unfit. But Amber being Amber, she wasn't about to take no for an answer. One Friday night, while I was watching a movie with Emma and Liam, there was a pounding at the front door. My stomach dropped. I knew it wasn't a neighbor. When I opened the door, there she was. Amber stood on the porch, hair disheveled, her makeup smeared like she'd been crying or drinking. Noah, let me in, she slurred, trying to push past me. I need to see my kids. They're asleep, I lied, standing firm. You need to leave. Her face twisted into a sneer. You can't keep them from me. I'm their mother. You're the woman who tried to sell their childhood home to fund her affair. I shot back, my voice low and cold. You're the one who stole from them. And me. So don't stand here and act like you care about anyone but yourself. Amber's expression shifted, her drunken bravado faltering for a moment. But then, like clockwork, she started crying, the tears spilling as she leaned against the doorframe. I made mistakes, Noah, she sobbed. But I love you. I love us. Please, let me come home. We can fix this. There it was, the same manipulative play she'd been running for months, banking on my sympathy to weasel her way back in. But I wasn't falling for it this time. Not after everything she'd done. Amber, you don't love me, I said, stepping back and pulling the door with me. You loved the life I gave you, the comfort, the money, the stability, but you threw all of that away. And now you're reaping what you sowed. Her tears turned to anger in an instant. You think you're better than me? She screamed, slamming her hand against the door. You're nothing without me. You wouldn't even have this house, this life, if it weren't for me. Get off my property before I call the cops, I said, my tone deadly calm. This is your last warning. She staggered backward, her expression a mixture of rage and desperation. You're going to regret this, Noah, she hissed. Mark my words. Good night, Amber, I said, and shut the door in her face. I waited until I heard her car start and peel away before letting myself breathe. The next morning, I explained the situation to Emma and Liam. Your mom came by last night, I said gently. She wanted to see you, but I told her it wasn't a good time. Is she okay? Emma asked, frowning. I hesitated, then decided honesty was best. She's struggling right now, I said. She made some bad choices, and it's going to take her a while to figure things out, but we're going to be okay. We're strong, remember? Emma nodded, her lips pressed together. We don't need her, she said quietly. She just makes things worse. Her words cut deeper than she knew, but I didn't argue. Liam, meanwhile, didn't even ask about Amber. He just climbed into my lap, clutching his stuffed dinosaur like nothing had happened. Amber tried a few more stunts in the weeks that followed, showing up at Liam's soccer game uninvited, sending letters filled with fake apologies and promises she had no intention of keeping. Each time I shut her down. I had spent years cleaning up her messes, covering for her lies, and hoping she'd change. But I was done. She didn't deserve another chance to destroy the life I was rebuilding. Eventually, her efforts fizzled out. Whether she got tired of being ignored or moved on to her next victim, I didn't care. My focus was on Emma and Liam, giving them the stability they deserved, and making sure they knew they were loved. Amber became a distant memory, a shadow of a life we'd left behind. And though I would always carry the scars of her betrayal, I refused to let them define me, or my kids. Update. Hey Reddit, back with another update because Amber has managed to outdo herself yet again. It's been a while since the Derek disaster, and life has been solid for me and the kids. Emma's thriving as a soccer star. Liam's still my little Lego architect, and we've built a life with peace and stability. But of course, Amber can't let us have that without one last cringe-worthy comeback attempt. Out of the blue, Amber lawyered up and filed to modify custody. Why? Because she suddenly decided she's rehabilitated and wants to play mommy again. The court absolutely roasted her. Between her criminal history, hello, forgery and theft, and Rick's evidence of her shady financial moves, she didn't stand a chance. Petition denied. Game over. Before that custody stunt got shut down, Amber tried a few surprise visits to make it look like she cared. One time, she showed up at Liam's soccer game uninvited, yelling from the sidelines like she was team mom or something. The other parents were like, "Who is this lady?" Liam barely even acknowledged her. Another time, she cornered Emma after school and tried to guilt trip her with tears and promises to make things right. Emma shut her down like a pro, told her to stop lying, and walked away. That kid is a rock star. After the custody denial, Amber decided to pull the pity card. She started calling me nonstop, leaving these wild voicemails about how she made mistakes and how we should forgive her for the kids' sake. The cherry on top? She showed on my porch one night, demanding to see the kids. She screamed about how I was poisoning them against her, and then flipped to sobbing about how she missed our family. I told her to leave before I called the cops. That was the last time she tried pulling that stunt. Meanwhile, the kids and I are doing better than ever. We've turned the house into our home. Fresh paint, new furniture, and a trampoline the kids saved up for. Max, our golden retriever, keeps us all busy and happy. Emma's winning soccer tournaments, Liam's building insane Lego worlds, and we're planning a big Grand Canyon trip next summer. Life feels lighter, calmer, and finally ours. Amber? She's a distant memory at this point. The kids barely mention her, and I'm not about to push it. If she wants to be a mom someday, she has to prove it. Not just with words, but with actions. So far, she's only proven she's good at making bad decisions. Anyway, that's where we're at. Amber can keep spiraling, but me and the kids? We're moving forward. One step, one Lego tower, and one soccer goal at a time. Update 2: Hey Reddit, it's been a few months since my last update, and while life for me and the kids has been great, Amber's antics haven't completely faded. But I'll get to that. Out of nowhere, Amber popped up again, trying a new angle. She reached out to me directly, big mistake, and claimed she had turned over a new leaf after attending some sketchy-sounding healing retreat. She said she wanted to make amends and start fresh as co-parents. This might have been almost believable if she hadn't immediately followed it up by asking for money. Yes, money. Her excuse? She wanted to get back on her feet to better support the kids. Sure, Amber. I didn't engage. My lawyer did. Amber tried filing another custody modification, claiming she had changed and deserved partial custody. Her pitch? Bunch of dubious character references from people who probably didn't know the full story. My lawyer, Rick's rock-solid evidence, and Amber's criminal record made quick work of her case. The court wasn't having it. The judge shut her down again, emphasizing the need for stability in the kids' lives, which Amber has consistently proven she can't provide. Here's where things get even messier. Turns out, Amber's back to her old ways. Rick, yes, he's still my go-to PI, uncovered that she's involved with yet another shady character, this time a wannabe entrepreneur who's already been sued for fraud twice. Amber seems to have a type. While this doesn't directly impact me and the kids, it's clear she's still chasing the same toxic cycle that got her into trouble in the first place. Emma and Liam are handling everything like champs. Amber has tried reaching out a few times. Letters, random social media messages, even sending Liam a birthday card with cash in it, which he immediately handed to me saying, I don't want it. Emma is especially protective of Liam and makes it clear she doesn't trust her mom. The last time Amber tried to guilt-trip Emma, my 12-year-old looked her dead in the eye and said, You only care when it's convenient for you. I've never been prouder. The kids and I have officially moved forward. We've turned our house into a true sanctuary. Emma picked out a new paint color for her room. Purple, of course. And Liam's Lego empire now includes a theme park. We've also started a family tradition of Sunday hikes with Max, which the kids love. Next summer, we're still planning our Grand Canyon trip, and I'm working on surprising them with tickets to Disneyland too. Amber's influence has become nothing more than background noise. She occasionally pops up with her drama, but we're unfazed. My focus is on my kids and giving them the life they deserve, one free of lies, chaos, and betrayal. So, to anyone out there dealing with a similar situation, remember this. You can't control someone else's choices, but you can control how you respond to them. For me, that meant choosing peace, stability, and unconditional love for my kids. Amber can keep spiraling, but we're building something real, something she'll never touch again. Thanks for sticking with me through this journey, Reddit. Here's to brighter days ahead.
I never expected to discover my family's betrayal through a half-closed door. But there I was, frozen in the hallway of our Victorian home, hearing my parents discuss giving away my college fund to my sister Callista. Again. My name is Alara, and I've spent 19 years being the other daughter. The one who wasn't quite good enough, who didn't quite fit the mold. That night, I learned exactly how little I mattered. Callista's business is struggling, Greg. She needs this more than Alara needs art school. My mother's voice carried through the gap. Besides, painting isn't a real career path. I pressed myself against the wall, my heart hammering. The sketchbook I'd planned to show them felt heavy in my hands, filled with the portfolio pieces I'd spent months perfecting. What about the promise we made? My father's voice held a hint of hesitation. We told Alara. Promises change when circumstances do. My mother cut in. Callista has real responsibilities now. A husband, a business. Alara is just dreaming. Just dreaming. The words hit like a physical blow. I'd heard variations of this my entire life, but something about hearing it so baldly stated made my blood run cold. She'll understand, my mother continued. She always does. That's when I heard the soft click of designer heels on hardwood, Callista. Of course she was there too. My perfect older sister, who'd already burned through her own college fund and 3 failed business ventures. I'll pay her back, Callista said, her voice thick with what I recognized as fake tears. Once the boutique takes off, I'll make it right. I'd heard that before. Just like I'd heard every other empty promise she'd made, while taking everything I had. My art supplies when we were kids. My friends in high school. Now my future. The conversation continued, but I was already moving. Up the stairs, silent as a ghost. To my room. My hands shook as I pulled my emergency bag from under the bed. The one I'd packed months ago, but never had the courage to use. I thought about my grandmother Iris's offer to stay with her. The one I'd been too loyal to accept.
Until now.
As I slipped out into the night, my phone buzzed. A text from Callista. Family meeting in 10 minutes. Mom says it's important. I smiled grimly as I typed my response. Sorry, sis. I'm done being the family ATM. Good luck with the boutique. Then I blocked her number, adjusted my backpack, and started walking. They wanted to take my dreams?
Fine.
But they were about to learn that their reliable, understanding Alara had finally run out of understanding to give. Grandmother Iris's house smelled like oil paints and fresh coffee when I arrived at midnight. She didn't ask questions, just wrapped me in a hug that smelled of lavender and turpentine, then led me to the kitchen where a mug of hot chocolate was waiting. Somehow, she'd known I was coming. Your mother called, Iris said, settling into her favorite chair. She's quite worked up. I gripped my mug tighter. Let me guess, she said I'm being dramatic and ungrateful? Actually, she seemed more concerned about what the neighbors might think. Iris's eyes twinkled. Apparently, running away to your grandmother's house isn't what respectable young ladies do. That startled a laugh out of me. Trust my mother to worry about appearances even now. My phone had been buzzing nonstop with messages from my family, but I couldn't bring myself to look at them yet. There's something you should see, Iris said, standing slowly. She disappeared into her study and returned with a wooden box, weathered with age. I've been waiting for the right moment to show you these. Inside were letters, dozens of them, yellowed with time. The first one I pulled out was dated 1965, written in elegant script. Dearest Iris, I know Mother and Father don't approve of your art. But please don't give up. Your talent deserves. Your great-aunt wrote those, Iris explained. She supported my dreams of becoming an artist when everyone else said I was being foolish. She paused, touching one of the letters gently. I let them talk me out of it. Married your grandfather instead, became the proper society wife everyone expected. But you still paint, I said, gesturing to the canvases that filled her home. Yes, but imagine what could have been if I'd had the courage you showed tonight. She squeezed my hand. Now, there's something else you should know. I found these while cleaning last week. She pulled out another stack of papers, bank statements. My eyes widened as I saw the numbers. Grandmother, this is my art fund, she said simply. The one I never used. It's been gathering interest for 60 years, and it's yours now. Enough for art school, and then some. I started to protest, but she held up a hand. I already updated the paperwork. Your parents can't touch it, and neither can Callista. My phone buzzed again, a text from Callista. Mom's hysterical. Dad's threatening to cut you off completely. Please come home, so we can fix this. I showed the message to Iris, who snorted. They can't cut you off from what they've already taken, can they? For the first time since leaving home, I felt something other than anger and hurt. Something that felt a lot like hope. No, I said, reaching for my sketchbook. They can't. I had a new story to tell now, and I was going to paint it in colors they'd never seen coming. I was sorting through Grandmother Iris's art supplies when Callista showed up unannounced. She stood in the doorway, designer purse clutched tight, looking more disheveled than I'd ever seen her. "Your phone's been off for days," she said, stepping into the studio uninvited. Her eyes darted around, taking in the half-finished canvases and scattered brushes. "Mom's beside herself. I'm sure she'll survive." I kept arranging paintbrushes, refusing to look at her. "How'd you find me?" "Grandmother Iris isn't exactly hiding you." Callista moved closer, her expensive perfume mixing unpleasantly with the paint fumes. "Look, there's something you need to know about the boutique." "Let me guess, it's failing?" I finally turned to face her. "Again?" Her face crumpled slightly. "Nolan made some investments without telling me. Used the business as collateral. We're about to lose everything." I laughed, the sound harsh even to my own ears. "And you need more money to fix it? That's why you're here." "It's not just about money," Callista's voice cracked. "Nolan's gone. He cleaned out our accounts yesterday and disappeared." That stopped me cold. I studied my sister's face, really looked at her for the first time in years. The designer clothes couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes or the slight tremor in her hands. "I'm sorry," I said, meaning it. "But I can't help you. Can't or won't." Her eyes landed on the bank statements on Iris's desk. "Grandmother gave you her art fund, didn't she? That could save the boutique. Give me time to— To what?" I interrupted. "To find another get-rich-quick scheme? Another charming husband to solve all your problems." "That's not fair." "Neither is taking my future again." I picked up a brush, dipping it in deep red paint. "You want to know something funny? I actually believed you'd pay me back someday. Every single time." Callista reached for my arm. "Elara, please. I'm pregnant." The brush clattered to the floor, leaving a crimson splash like a wound on the hardwood. "What?" "6 weeks. I haven't told anyone else." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I can't do this alone." I stared at my sister, the golden child, the perfect daughter, now standing in my grandmother's studio, looking completely lost. Part of me wanted to help her, to fall back into our old patterns. But then I remembered all the times she'd taken without asking, all the dreams she'd carelessly crushed. "You're right," I said quietly. "You can't do this alone." But neither could I, and that didn't stop anyone from taking everything I had. "Elara. Go home, Callista. Tell Mom and Dad about the baby. I'm sure they'll figure something out." I turned back to my canvas. "They always do for you." The door closed behind her with a soft click, but I kept painting, turning my sister's tears into art she'd never understand. The acceptance letter from the Florence Academy of Art arrived on a Tuesday morning. I stood in Iris's kitchen, hands shaking as I read the words again. "We are pleased to offer you." The same day, my father showed up at the door. "Your mother doesn't know I'm here," he said, looking uncomfortable in Iris's artistic chaos. His eyes landed on the letter in my hands. "Is that—" "Yes." I didn't offer to let him read it. "Full scholarship." He nodded, running a hand through his graying hair. "Callista told us about Nolan. And the baby. I figured she would." "The police are looking for him," Dad continued. "But the money's gone. All of it, including what we gave her from your fund." I laughed, the sound bitter even to my own ears. "Is that supposed to make me feel better?" "No, it's supposed to make you understand." He pulled out his phone, showing me a news article. "Nolan's done this before. Different names, different cities. Always targeting wealthy families through their daughters." The room seemed to tilt. "What?" "We should have checked more carefully. Should have listened when you said something felt off about him." Dad's voice cracked slightly. "Your mother's pride. Our pride. We wanted so badly to believe Callista had found success." I stared at the article, at the photos of other women Nolan had conned. "Does Callista know?" "Not yet. He hesitated. She's not doing well. The doctor's worried about her blood pressure, the baby." "Don't." I cut him off. "Don't try to make me feel guilty about this." "I'm not." I'm trying to apologize. He looked around at Iris's paintings, really seeing them for the first time. We were wrong about your art, Alara. About a lot of things. The acceptance letter felt heavy in my hands. Florence. Everything I dreamed of. And yet, the detective thinks Nolan might come back, Dad said quietly. Try to get more money, through Callista. She's vulnerable right now, and your mother? She's not handling any of this well. I thought about Callista's face in the studio, the fear I'd ignored. What are you asking me to do? Nothing. You've earned this chance. He gestured to the letter. But if you wanted to come home, help us figure this out as a family, there's room for compromise now. I looked at my latest painting drying in the corner, a storm-dark landscape with a single path leading into light. The choice it represented felt suddenly, painfully clear. I'll think about it, I said finally. Dad nodded, turning to leave. At the door, he paused. The painting, it's beautiful. After he left, I sat in Iris's studio for hours, staring at the acceptance letter and wondering why victory suddenly felt so much like loss. Jasper Lynn's art studio was everything I'd imagined and nothing like home. Industrial windows flooded the space with natural light, and the walls were covered in massive canvases that made my own work feel small and safe in comparison. Your technique is solid, he said, studying my portfolio. But you're holding back. These pieces, they're technically perfect, but where's the rage? I shifted uncomfortably. I'm not sure what you mean. He held up my latest piece, a serene landscape with that hidden storm brewing in the background. You paint like someone trying not to make waves. But art isn't about being nice, Solara. It's about truth. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. Another text from Callista. Nolan contacted me. Says he wants to make things right. Please call. I switched the phone off, but Jasper had noticed my reaction. Family drama? Something like that. He nodded, pulling out a blank canvas. Show me. What? Paint it. Whatever's eating at you, put it on canvas. No thinking, no planning. Just feel it. I picked up a brush, hesitating. Then I thought about Callista's tears, my father's apology, my mother's silence. The brush dipped into deep crimson, and suddenly I was painting like I never had before. Wild strokes, dark colors bleeding into each other. Hours passed. When I finally stepped back, I barely recognized my own work. The canvas was a storm of emotions, betrayal, anger, love, fear, all tangled together in a way that made my chest tight. Now that, Jasper said quietly, is honest. My phone had 7 missed calls. As I checked them, a text from Dad appeared. Callista's meeting Nolan tomorrow. Says she won't tell anyone where. Please help. Bad news. Jasper asked. My sister's about to do something stupid. I stared at my painting, all that raw emotion laid bare. And I have to decide if I'm going to let her. Sometimes the hardest art comes from the hardest choices. He gestured to his own work, beautiful, brutal pieces that told uncomfortable truths. What's your real masterpiece going to be, Alara? Revenge? Or something braver? I looked at my wild, honest painting, then at my phone. The next text was from my mother. I was wrong. About everything. Please don't let your sister face him alone. I have to go, I said, gathering my things. Jasper nodded. The Florence Academy called. They need your final decision by Friday. I paused at the door, looking back at my painting, at all that beautiful, terrible truth. I'll let you know. The choice ahead felt like standing on the edge of a cliff. But for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the fall. I found Callista at the old pier where we used to feed ducks as kids. She was sitting on a bench, one hand resting on her barely visible bump, staring at the water. No sign of Nolan yet. You shouldn't have come, she said without looking at me. Neither should you. I sat beside her, scanning the empty boardwalk. The police are looking for him. He says he has proof. Her voice cracked. Videos, photos of Mom and Dad doing illegal things with the business. He'll release them unless you give him more money. I felt sick. Money you don't have. She finally turned to me, eyes red-rimmed. I told him about grandmother's art fund. The world seemed to tilt sideways. You what? He promised he'd destroy everything if I give him my future? The laugh that escaped me didn't sound human. Again, movement caught my eye, a familiar figure approaching from the shadows. Nolan, looking exactly as charming as the day he'd first swept into our lives. My favorite sister-in-law, he called out, spreading his arms like this was a family reunion. I knew you'd come. I stood, positioning myself between him and Callista. The police are on their way. No, they're not. His smile never wavered. Because you're smart enough to know what happens if they show up. Your father's creative accounting, your mother's insider trading. All of it goes public. The Whitman family name becomes worthless. You're lying. He pulled out his phone, showing us video clips, documents. Your parents weren't as careful as they thought. Now, about that art fund. I felt Callista's hand grip mine the same way she used to when we were kids, and she was scared. But we weren't kids anymore, and I wasn't the same person who always gave in. Keep the evidence, I said quietly. Ilara, no. Callista started. Release it all. I stepped forward. Because I'm done protecting this family's precious reputation. Done sacrificing my dreams to fix everyone else's mistakes. Nolan's smile faltered. You're bluffing. I pulled out my phone, dialed, and put it on speaker. Detective Martinez? I'm with Nolan Reed right now, and I have something you should hear. What happened next was chaos. Nolan running, police appearing from nowhere, Callista crying. But all I could think about was the acceptance letter in my pocket, getting crumpled as I held my sister while she sobbed. I'm so sorry, she kept saying, for everything. I watched the police lead Nolan away, wondering if revenge was supposed to feel this hollow. The family reputation was about to be destroyed, my sister's life was in shambles, and my dream of Florence felt further away than ever. Sometimes winning feels an awful lot like losing. The headlines hit the next morning. Whitman family business under investigation. Mother was in tears on our front porch when I arrived, clutching a newspaper like it was a life preserver. How could you, she whispered. Our reputation was built on lies. I stepped past her into the house, where Dad and Callista sat in the living room. The same room where they decided to take my future. Just like everything else in this family. Dad stood, looking older than I'd ever seen him. The police called. Nolan's agreed to testify against his other victims' families in exchange for leniency. Other families? Callista's hand went to her stomach. There were others? 7, I said quietly. All with daughters like you. All too proud to admit they'd been conned. Mother slammed the newspaper down. And now everyone knows we're frauds. The charity board, our friends. Stop. My voice cut through her hysteria. Just stop pretending this is about reputation. This is about control. It always has been. That's not. You controlled Callista with expectations. You controlled me by taking away my chances. I pulled out my acceptance letter, now worn from constant handling. But you can't control this anymore. Callista stood shakily. The baby, it's not Nolan's. The room went silent. Mother sank into a chair. What? Dad's voice was barely audible. I lied because I was scared. There is no baby. Callista's tears fell freely now. I thought if everyone was focused on me again, trying to save me. You wouldn't have to admit you'd failed, I finished. The irony wasn't lost on me. Her final lie had been an attempt to protect herself from the truth. The police want statements from all of us, Dad said, breaking the heavy silence. About the business, about Nolan? I'll tell them everything, Mother said suddenly. We all turned to look at her. About the accounting, the trading, everything. It's time to stop pretending we're perfect. I studied my mother's face, seeing for the first time the cracks in her carefully maintained facade. Why now? Because I saw your painting at Jasper's studio. She met my eyes. The one with all the rage and pain. That's what I did to you. What I did to both of you. Callista reached for my hand, not to take this time, but to hold on. What happens now? I looked at my acceptance letter, then at my broken, imperfect family. Now we stop pretending and maybe start being honest about who we really are. Even if it means losing everything? Mother asked. Sometimes, I said, thinking of Grandmother Iris's words, you have to lose everything to find what matters. The silence that followed felt like the first honest moment we'd shared in years. 6 months later, I stood in Grandmother Iris's studio, surrounded by her lifetime of hidden artwork. Each piece told.
Hey there. I'm Juliana Bridges, a 38-year-old working at an advertising agency. In our little unit, it's me, my husband David, and our 8-year-old daughter Mia. We're not swimming in money, but we do all right. You see, the advertising agency I work for takes care of us pretty nicely. I mean, my paycheck is quite something, especially when you compare it to what others in similar office gigs are getting. Yep, I bring home a pretty hefty salary. I've never had to worry about spending money each month, and we've even been able to save up for Mia's college tuition. Considering the cost of living and our home mortgage, we've always had some extra money left over. David was well aware of my high salary, and perhaps his pride was hurt because a year ago he quit his job and started freelancing in web design. He said he switched to freelancing because his salary job had hidden its pay ceiling, but I was skeptical about how much one could really earn as a freelancer. Of course, I objected when he said he wanted to quit. I thought it would be safer to stay in his job, get his full retirement benefits, and then think about other options. But David was adamant about freelancing, so that's what he did. Ever since he began freelancing, David has been working from home. Maybe his stated reason for quitting his job was just a cover, and he was really tired of the office politics. Either way, I had to get used to a new routine where David was always home when I left for work. At first, Mia seemed happy that her dad was always at home when she came back from school, but lately she seemed somewhat discontented. She probably feels like she's being constantly watched. She's only 8, but Mia is more mature than her classmates. So, our life was going along without any major issues, but I didn't notice that the cracks started appearing when David began working from home. When David started working from home, I asked him if he could help a little with the household chores. Can you help with things like cleaning and laundry? I'll still cook the meals, like I always have. Excuse me, why do I have to do housework? You're home more, and you have more free time. It'd be nice if you could help out a bit when you're not too tired. Free. Just because I'm a freelancer doesn't mean I'm not busy. In fact, I've got a lot on my plate. I can't deal with household stuff on top of that. Unbelievable. David just brushed aside my modest request. I understand that freelancing can be more unstable and mentally taxing compared to a regular salaried job. That's one reason why I didn't want him to switch in the first place. But household chores are nobody's specific job, and I've been doing them all alone even though we've both been working. I thought you could share some of the load. But I work too, you know. It should be equal. You've managed everything by yourself up until now. Don't start complaining now. David, who was convinced he was in the right, wouldn't listen to me at all. In the end, I continued to handle all the household chores as usual. I don't assume he's not busy just because he works from home, but whenever I return home late at night, I'd invariably find David sprawled in front of the TV or deeply engrossed in his smartphone. Is dinner ready? He'd ask with an air of entitlement which always infuriated me. What's more, since working from home, he seemed to become more concerned about cleanliness, always demanding that I clean the house more thoroughly, pointing out every little piece of dirt on the floor, the windows, and the bathroom. If you're so concerned, why don't you clean it up yourself? I'm only human. I can't get to everything, I'd reply. You're talking back to me. Clean up your own mess. It's our family's home. It's not like I'm the only one making it dirty. Yet David would go off on these bizarre tangents, and I was utterly baffled by his logic. Mia would quietly listen to our exchanges from a distance. "You know, Dad's always glued to his phone. I wish we could go out together on weekends, but Daddy's always busy on his phone," Mia said one Sunday morning as I was preparing breakfast. Apparently, Mia had asked David to go out and play the previous evening, but he'd refused, barely looking up from his phone. That's true. He's always on that phone. He's been like that since before you come home from work. Sometimes he's on calls, too. Calls? Yeah, he always sounds friendly, and I can hear a woman's voice. That's odd. From Mia's account, it didn't seem like David was talking to a client or a colleague. I tried to think of who he could be talking to so frequently. As a freelancer, I was unfamiliar with the world of freelancing, so I didn't know. But the mention of a woman's voice was definitely bothering me. Could he be having an affair? It wasn't unthinkable. He had started working from home only a few months ago, and he now had more free time than when he had a regular job. Trying to not let Mia see my agitation, I focused on preparing breakfast. Several months passed since David started freelancing. He still never helped with any of the household chores, and he began spending whole days away from home during weekends. "I have work to do. Freelancers don't get days off," he'd say as he left the house, dressed sharper than usual, even wearing cologne and accessories he didn't normally use. I had my suspicions, but with no evidence, confronting him would be pointless. Besides, even if David was cheating, I was torn about what I should do. I knew it would be better to part ways, but thinking of Mia, it wasn't an easy decision. Every day, I agonized over the potential consequences for Mia of taking her father away from her. Our lives continued in this way, but a turning point was soon to come. One Monday morning, as I was preparing for work, Mia didn't get up as usual, and I was getting anxious that she'd be late for school. "Mia, it's morning. You need to get up or you'll be late for school." When I went to Mia's room to wake her up, she looked completely drained. I rushed to her side, placing my hand on her forehead. "You're burning up, Mia." "Yeah, I got a thermometer and took her temperature. It read 103 degrees Fahrenheit. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't take the day off today. I had an important meeting." While I was panicking, David entered the room. "What happened, David?" "Mia is running a high fever. I can't take the day off from work today. Maybe we should call a babysitter." "A babysitter? I'll take care of her. Just let her rest, all right? I can make her some soup. It'll be fine." I was utterly taken aback by David's sudden willingness to take care of Mia. David, who had never lifted a finger to help with household chores or child rearing, now offering to care for our daughter when she's sick. Unbelievable. Though I found it hard to believe, I decided to trust him given the urgency of the situation. "All right, thank you. There's some fruit in the fridge. Give her some if she feels like eating." "Got it." Relieved by David's reassuring response, I hurriedly got ready and left the house. I was deeply concerned about Mia, but arriving at work on time was my top priority for the moment. By the time I reached my office in New York, the skies had darkened and it had started raining. Fortunately, I had a foldable umbrella with me, so I reached the office without getting wet. The meeting began in the afternoon as scheduled, but I couldn't stop thinking about Mia. The office was abuzz due to the sound of heavy rain and strong winds from outside. Come to think of it, wasn't there news about a hurricane approaching? I'd been so busy lately that I hadn't been keeping up with the weather updates, but I remembered a warning about a hurricane making landfall tonight. During the meeting, all of my colleagues, including myself, were constantly distracted by the storm outside, frequently glancing out the windows. By 7:00 p.m., when I was finally done with work and heading home, the earlier storm had turned into a torrential downpour, causing several train delays. The train I was supposed to catch was also delayed, and the platform was packed with people. I was really worried about Mia, who was running a high fever and couldn't bear the thought of waiting there. I hurriedly left the station and began looking for a taxi. There were many others waiting for taxis too, so it took quite a while, but after about 30 minutes I finally managed to hail one. After a 30-minute ride, I arrived home but was speechless at the sight that greeted me. Mia. To my horror, Mia was lying unconscious in front of our entrance. I quickly scooped her up. "Mia, are you okay? What happened, Daddy?" Seeing me might have comforted her, as after she whispered, "Daddy," she just slumped, looking exhausted. Despite being drenched in rain, her body was burning up. I turned to the taxi I just got off from and knocked on the window. "I'm sorry I need you again. Please take us to the nearest hospital." Seeing Mia's condition and my desperation, the driver quickly opened the door, understanding the gravity of the situation. I quickly hopped into the taxi. "I need to get to the nearest hospital fast." "Mia, Mia," throughout the ride, I kept calling out to Mia. I felt if I didn't, something terrible might happen to her. I desperately wanted to know why she was outside in the first place, especially during a storm. But right now, saving her was more important. Despite the heavy rain and the slow-moving traffic, we finally reached the hospital. "Ma'am, do take care, especially if you're heading back in this storm," the kind taxi driver said as he dropped us off. "Thank you so much," I replied, grateful for his concern. With a kind-hearted driver seeing me off, I rushed Mia to the hospital. Even though the hospital was busy with many patients, the receptionist quickly realized the urgency upon seeing Mia's condition and got her immediate attention. 30 minutes later, a doctor finally examined Mia, informing me that she was semiconscious due to a high fever. Thankfully, she had no physical injuries. If her fever reduces, she should be okay. However, given that she'd apparently been outside in the rain for hours with that fever, she had to be admitted immediately, the doctor explained. "Mia, I'm so sorry. I hope you feel better soon," a nurse said reassuringly. "We'll take good care of her. You should rest today," she added, acknowledging my exhaustion. After spending 5 hours at the hospital endlessly staring at Mia's pained face as she slept, a nurse finally approached me. Though I wanted to stay by Mia's side, I was exhausted both physically and mentally. Having worked all day and then seeing Mia in this state, I was spent. I decided it was best to let the nurses handle it and head home. Everything that happened to Mia was undoubtedly David's fault. Mia murmuring "Daddy" before passing out was evidence enough. It was inconceivable that Mia, with such a high fever, would willingly go outside, especially not during a storm. The more I thought about what David had done, the angrier I became. Unable to comprehend or forgive him, all the way home I pondered what to say to him. If he hears that Mia is okay, he might think it's all right to continue with his reckless behavior in the future. I absolutely don't want that to happen. I needed him to deeply reflect on his actions. Even more than feeling remorse with a certain resolve, I headed home. When I arrived, wet from the rain, David was casually fiddling with his smartphone. Noticing me, he looked up in surprise. "Hey, where's Mia? Wasn't she sleeping?" he asked at the entrance. She said she wanted to play outside. I told her not to, but she wouldn't listen. Seeing David ask that with such nonchalance made my anger boil over. Mia went out on her own. He's the one who tossed her out in the first place. I clenched my fists tightly and replied. "She just passed away," I said, feeling a surge of emotion. "What?" As I stood in the doorway, David stared at me with a dumbfounded look. The shock of hearing that his daughter had died seemed too much for him to grasp. "What are you talking about? Stop playing sick jokes. That's in bad taste," he said, incredulous. The nerve of him to mock me as I stood there, drenched from the rain. "It's not a lie. What have you done?" I asked, my voice trembling with rage. "I'll handle the funeral arrangements, so stay away from the house for a while." "Goodbye," I said firmly, storming out of the house. Seeing me shaking with rage, it finally hit David how serious the situation was. "Are you for real?" he blurted out, realizing the gravity of the situation. But his reaction seemed so detached, as if it was happening to someone else, which irritated me even more. I turned on my heels, the fury inside me blazing. "I won't ever forgive him. I'll drag him down to hell if I have to," I thought as I stormed out of the house. I managed to find a vacant hotel and decided to stay there for a while. Although it would cost me, now wasn't the time to worry about money. I wanted to get back at David. If he felt remorse and changed his ways after hearing about Mia's death, I might reconsider my approach. But seeing that he didn't call or message me that day, it was clear he couldn't care less about what happened to Mia. This only fueled my anger further, and I began to devise a plan to make him pay. The next morning, I woke up and immediately headed to the hospital. I got word that Mia had regained consciousness. "Mia, are you okay?" I asked anxiously. "Mom, yeah, I'm fine now. My fever's gone down," Maya replied with a weak smile. "Oh, thank goodness." I hugged Mia tightly and gently stroked her head. She giggled as if tickled by the gesture, relishing the joy of Mia's return. Eventually, I pressed her for the truth. "Mia, what happened yesterday?" "Daddy kicked me out. He said I was in the way and told me to leave," Mia explained, her voice trembling. "Then a woman came in and they chatted like they were close." "A woman? What did she look like?" I asked, feeling a sense of dread. I didn't get a good look, but she was young. She had bright red nails and wore skinny heels. I couldn't believe it. David was having an affair. Not only did he bring his mistress home on a day Mia had a high fever, but he also locked his own daughter outside. It was beyond comprehension. How could he do something so horrible? "I'm sorry, Mia. That must have been terrifying," I said, trying to comfort her. "Yeah, but I was happy you came to save me," Maya replied, her eyes shining with gratitude. For David to put Mia through such trauma and think he could be happy with his mistress, it was unforgivable. I felt a burning rage consuming me. "By the way, Daddy said he's going to invite that lady over again next Sunday," Mia added. "Next Sunday? That's the day I'm supposed to go on the company trip. He's planning to spend a fun day with his mistress while I'm away," I exclaimed, appalled. But it strengthened my resolve. "Thanks for telling me," I patted Mia's back, vowing to get back at David. The following Sunday, I decided to take Mia and return home. I informed my company that, due to personal reasons, I wouldn't be able to attend the trip. After Mia was discharged, we had been staying at the hotel together. It had been a while since we were home, but as we approached the front door, it felt like we were entering someone else's house. "We're home," I announced as Mia and I entered the house like usual. Sure enough, there were unfamiliar high heels at the entrance, just as Mia had said. The thought of David and his mistress enjoying themselves deeper in the house made my skin crawl. David wasn't in the living room, so I headed to the bedroom, thinking that Mia might witness something too intense. I hesitated for a moment, but the room was quiet. As I listened closely, I could hear David's voice coming from the bedroom. "You know, it really worked out for me with Mia gone. It made breaking up easier," David's voice echoed through the room. "How can you say such a thing about your own daughter?" The woman's voice responded. "But yeah, for me, it was kind of lucky," David continued. Hearing the two of them talking about Mia's supposed death as if it was a good thing or lucky made my head spin. It was clear now. David didn't feel an ounce of remorse. If that's the case, it's time to confront him directly, I thought, steeling myself. "Excuse us," I said as Mia and I appeared after opening the bedroom door. The two of them were taken aback, with wide eyes. "Why the hell are you here? You said you were on a company trip," David exclaimed, bewildered. "And why is Mia here?" the woman added, equally surprised. "What do you mean? Wasn't Mia supposed to be dead?" David said, his voice rising in panic. "I suppose it would be quite shocking to see Mia, who they believed to be dead, standing right in front of them," I explained calmly. "The part about Mia being dead was a lie. I'm sorry, I just wanted to see your reaction. I hoped you might show some remorse, but instead, you're here celebrating Mia's supposed death. That's just insane," I said, feeling a mix of frustration and disappointment. "A lie. Damn it, you played with my feelings," David exclaimed, his face contorted with anger. "Don't mess with me. You're the one who kicked Mia out of the house, right?" I shot back, my voice trembling with rage. "No, I didn't. Daddy did kick me out. He said I was in the way because he wanted to be with that woman," Mia interjected, her voice filled with hurt. With Mia's swift revelation, David's face turned pale. "That's right, you did the worst possible thing, not just as a father, but as a human being," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "Mia was in such a condition that it wouldn't have been surprising if she had died, and you prioritized being with that woman over her," I added, pointing at the woman who had been silently watching our confrontation. "Oh, calling her my mistress, that's not right. She's a colleague from work," David tried to defend himself, but his words fell flat. "Wait, didn't you say you quit your job and you're freelancing now?" I asked, catching him off guard. "Well, David hesitated, unable to come up with a convincing lie. "We don't really need to ask her now, do we? Here's the evidence of your affair." I thrust a large envelope towards David. After hearing about David's affair, I decided to get a thorough investigation, but I never imagined the evidence would pile up so quickly. "Seems like David isn't very good at hiding things," I added, watching as David's face drained of color. Hesitantly, David opened the envelope, and as he pulled out the photos, he dropped them, scattering the evidence of his affair all over the floor. "This is so unfair. Do you enjoy cornering someone like this and putting them in a situation where they can't escape?" David exclaimed, his voice shaking with anger. "Don't mess with me. You're the one who kicked Mia out of the house, right?" I shot back, my voice trembling with rage. "No, I didn't. Daddy did kick me out. He said I was in the way because he wanted to be with that woman," Mia interjected, her voice filled with hurt. With Mia's swift revelation, David's face turned pale. "That's right, you did the worst possible thing, not just as a father, but as a human being," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "Mia was in such a condition that it wouldn't have been surprising if she had died, and you prioritized being with that woman over her," I added, pointing at the woman who had been silently watching our confrontation. "Oh, calling her my mistress, that's not right. She's a colleague from work," David tried to defend himself, but his words fell flat. "Wait, didn't you say you quit your job and you're freelancing now?" I asked, catching him off guard. "Well, David hesitated, unable to come up with a convincing lie. "We don't really need to ask her now, do we? Here's the evidence of your affair." I thrust a large envelope towards David. After hearing about David's affair, I decided to get a thorough investigation, but I never imagined the evidence would pile up so quickly. "Seems like David isn't very good at hiding things," I added, watching as David's face drained of color. Hesitantly, David opened the envelope, and as he pulled out the photos, he dropped them, scattering the evidence of his affair all over the floor. "This is so unfair. Do you enjoy cornering someone like this and putting them in a situation where they can't escape?" David exclaimed, his voice shaking with anger. "Who's the real coward here? I see no worth in staying with someone so thoughtless any longer," I retorted, feeling a surge of determination. "Let's get a divorce," I said firmly, thrusting a business card towards David. His eyes widened as he stared at the card, realizing the gravity of the situation. "Oh, and by the way, once we're separated, you'll, of course, be responsible for asset division and child support," I continued, not giving him a chance to protest. "I'll make sure to inform your company and your parents about everything. Be prepared for that," I added, watching as David's face paled even further. I glanced at the woman, his affair partner. "As for you, what? Why me?" "I didn't know anything about this," she protested, her voice trembling with fear. "Don't you know? You destroyed a family with your actions. You have to take responsibility," I replied sternly, my eyes narrowing at her. The woman began to panic, messing up her hair in distress. Both Mia and I watched her coldly. "If you don't have the money, find a way to get it. You two are in love, right? You should be able to overcome this together. Just never show up in front of Mia and me again," I said firmly, feeling a sense of justice. "I'll give you the house, but you're still responsible for the mortgage," I added, watching as David's face contorted with shock and disbelief. "Wait," David tried to protest, but I pulled Mia away, determined to protect her from any further harm. "Yes, Mia is going to lose her father, but I have no regrets. I won't put Mia in harm's way ever again. We'll do our best from now on, okay, Maya?" I asked, looking down at her. "Yeah," Maya replied, her eyes shining with determination. Mia looked surprisingly happy, which put me at ease. I decided to go back to my childhood home with Mia and stay there for a while. My parents were livid with David for cheating and putting Mia through such pain, to the point where they felt like giving David a piece of their mind. But I managed to calm them down and avoid further issues. "You can stay here as long as you need," my mom said warmly, hugging Mia tightly. "Thank you both," I replied gratefully, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. For now, everything seemed all right. As for David, he got a lawyer and managed to settle the child support and asset division in one payment. I couldn't imagine David having millions saved up, so he probably took on some debt. And with the remaining mortgage to pay off, David must be stretched pretty thin right now. A coworker from my company who went to high school with David updated me about him. Apparently, he ended up breaking up with his mistress. David had boasted to her about having money, so when the truth came out, they quickly parted ways. David's income was already halved from what he used to make as a salaried employee, so it's understandable. Now, in addition to his freelance work, he's scrambling with various part-time jobs. After losing his wife, daughter, and mistress, David will probably live a frugal life, paying off his debts. He got what he deserved. I hope he learns from his hardships and regrets his actions. "Mommy, today at school I made Grandparents' Day gifts for Grandma and Grandpa," Maya said excitedly. "Really? Let's give it to them later together, okay?" I replied, smiling at Mia. Seeing Mia so lively and happy, even without David around, made me feel content. From now on, I'm going to move forward at my own pace, with Mia by my side.